Okay.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. My name is Jennifer. I'm Comics Will Break Your Heart. So you're probably, obviously you're on this channel, but I'm joined by my guest, Mars, one of my favorite people in the
Hi.
world.
Oh.
So otherwise known as That Comic Girl. If you follow me on Instagram or you follow me here on YouTube and you're subscribed or you're just a friend and you're just watching, thank you. So you probably know who I am. I would think. I don't know. I don't know who I am, so make it up.
I don't know
But
either.
I don't know either. I don't know. It's just, it's like
She
the,
grabbed me off the street, asked me to talk about comics, offered me some whiskey later. I don't know.
there we go. That's all it takes, right? So go ahead, and for anyone who isn't already familiar with you, go ahead, introduce yourself. What do you
do? So I'm Mars. Jen already gave me those wonderful introductions, also known on the internet as That Comic Girl. And I talk about comics. I preach about comics. I have a YouTube channel where I make recommendations. I talk about the comics I'm reading. I also make recommendations for characters because, as we all know, comics have been around for a million years, and you never know when to start because there's a million Batman #1s on a shelf. So I try to make the world a little more easier and a little more friendly in terms of comics and more welcoming for women in comics, people of color in comics, and of course, queer individuals in comics, because I check at least 2 of those boxes. So
Yes, same. That should just maybe that's what we queer comics Sunday chat, whatever it ends up being.
whatever this is.
Yeah. I just want to go ahead and I want to shout out. There's a couple people already joining us in the chat already, so thank you for being here. So I see Tony. You say you're driving. Drive safe, but thank you for being here. Puff. Hi, thank you so much for being here. And Hero and the Kid, I'm not sure if it's who it is, if it's Hero or Will, or both of you, but thank you for being here. I super appreciate it. So today, the kind of impromptu reason why we're here is because we were initially going to go to another channel, another group, and talk about women in comics, woo. And then, things happen. It didn't work out.
It happens.
Yeah, and I was I don't know about you, but I get into a mood, even if it's 2 or 3 days before I know I'm supposed to do something, I get pumped, I get into a mood, and I'm I need to do something with this
I just
energy.
want to talk about comics. That's basically what it is I want to stand on a rooftop and just scream about comics. That's it.
Comics.
That's literally what it is.
100%. And it's so funny because I do my weekly show with Dan on Comic Chop News. Links in the bio if you want to check that out. I know you were just talking about these characters that that's mostly what you talk about, or you love the characters. And that's one thing that I love about your channel is that you do talk about characters, and you can see that there's this deep love for characters and their stories in your work. So I love that.
Listen, I approach half of these comic book characters by their first name, so don't know if that's cute or crazy or a little bit of both, but
yeah, definitely
that's where I stand right now.
I don't know, because I think that you and I probably have similar crushes on a lot of different characters.
At least I think our female taste is very similar. I don't
100%.
know. I don't know about our male taste. I feel like we've never actually talked about male characters that we have crushes on. It's always I want this lady to step on me, and to leave her husband for me.
Oh, 100%. Big Barda,
Big Barda,
Miracle Man behind. We've got you.
No, he can come too, as long as it's the Tom. As long as it's the Tom King bearded, Mitch Gerads Mr. Miracle, that's fine. If it's Jack Kirby Mr. Miracle, he can go somewhere.
Yeah. But I would say for maybe what we can do, because I know that we tend to get invited to these let's talk about women in comics, which is really fun. Maybe we should do a men in comics panel.
A men in comics
panel. Who are your favorite men in comics, and why is it important that we diversify comics a little bit? But for me, I feel my taste in men in comics is basically just Dr. Manhattan and Swamp Thing.
So you fantastical beasts and where to find them, basically, is what
Yeah.
this is.
For
I can
sure.
resonate. I feel like, I mean, I've talked about it on my channel before, but my taste in men is definitely like my scumbag boyfriend army.
Okay, yeah.
So like characters like Deadshot and Hush and Jason Todd. I mean, okay, Jason Todd is like the bad boy in comics. So I feel like if you're attracted to men, I feel like it's weird if you're not attracted to Jason Todd. I don't know.
Yeah.
I also have a really deep attraction to like himbos in comics. Apparently, like people on Twitter are calling me like the himbo queen, and I'm like, okay, because I like characters like Green Arrow and like Guy Gardner. Nobody loves Guy Gardner, but I would actually kill somebody for Guy Gardner. It's stupid, and I'm like, I'm gonna be honest, I've never really read anything Guy Gardner, so. My love for him. Wait, I'm just gonna quick derail because the story is bonkers.
This is. I want to prepare everyone. This is the show right now.
This is the show. So, like 3 or 4 years ago, I had a dream because I have really, really bizarre and like intense dreams. I had a dream that I got married to Guy Gardner, and this is like when I first started reading comics. I hadn't really read any Green Lantern. I just knew who Guy Gardner was, and I had a dream that me and him got married. I was like 23, and I'm like, guess I love Guy Gardner now.
You're
no
like,
big
okay.
deal.
Psyches are weird like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. They decide what you like.
I just like cute dumb boys. That's all.
100%. But when it comes to like the female characters that we both have like a comic book wife attraction to, like down the line, like at least 10 of them, like Batwoman, Magic, Big Barda, She-Hulk, like
I feel like it's just ladies that could like punch me in the face and I would say thank you.
1,000%.
It's basically what it is.
Yep. Cool. So let's I know we were talking about like what comic series that we've been digging lately. I know that there's a couple that like I'm not digging, and one of the fun things to me about women in comics is that or not so fun things is sometimes women in comics gets treated like we all have the same opinion, or that we all are going to gravitate towards the same characters or have the same opinion
and the same
about
like
things.
Girly characters and things like that. And it's like yes, but no.
Exactly. Like we do have some similarities on like some of the characters that we have crushes on, but like when it comes to the stories, sometimes they're wildly different, and we were just talking about that. So like what are some of the things that like you're picking up? What's on your pull list? What's on your like comic book radar right now?
Are we ready for this? Because like are we ready? Are we ready?
Yeah.
This doesn't count, but are we ready?
I was gonna say like there's so much here. And everyone in the chat too, if like you're chatting, watching, listening, smelling, feeling, whatever it is, go ahead and comment. Whatever it is in the chat that you're liking, like if there's some stuff that you're liking, I'd love to know in the chat. So
yeah, let us know what's on your comic pool list.
Yep, go for it. What's on your?
So first off, like not to play like a my dick is bigger, but like how many books are on your comic book pool list? Do you know?
I don't know right now. I know that I broke it down by like publisher. So I have like 2 or 3 things that are DC. And I'll be honest, I pick up the Ten of Swords series religiously, but it's not actually on my pull list. I just kind of like pick it up off the shelf. And my comic book store, so that's Books with Pictures here in Portland, Oregon. They're amazing. 100% like they're one of the best comic book shops I've ever been to. They're really, really good that if they know that I'm picking up a series regularly, they'll just kind of add it to my list and it's just there for me. So they are like magical, beautiful, amazing people in that way. So yeah, anyways, I would say that if I'm picking up 10 titles, it's a light week. Most of the weeks recently have been like 10 to 20 things that I pick up each week.
I think you have me beat because I think I have 13 titles altogether on my pool list. Now, I also pick up a lot of books because I'm an idiot and like to pick up books just because I like the cover.
Yep.
So I will spend $4 or $5 or $6 because DC Comics has been getting a little crazy lately just because I like the cover. So like a lot of the Wonder Woman covers right now.
I just did
the
same thing with the Native American Heritage Month I'm not even reading any of these titles, but I loved
But the covers
are so beautiful, and I want to do
Mhm.
something with them. So I don't know if I'm going to hang them up or what, but I just
Mhm.
maybe I'll end up reading the series. Who knows? But
Exactly. And like I also I try to pick up a lot of number one. So I like to go through previews every month and pick out what new series I want to try.
yeah,
So I probably do pick up maybe around the same amount as you at times. But in terms of consistency, I feel like I'm very picky on what I allow on my pull list, especially
yeah,
because I feel like I'm starting to gravitate more towards trades that I am like getting very picky and like everything. I'm like, oh, I'll just read it by trade. But then there's some
yeah,
of those books where it's like, I need to know what's happening.
yeah.
So should we start with like a controversial title right off the bat? Or should
What do you mean?
we
Like a controversial?
should we start arguing right off the bat?
Let's start arguing right off the
You want to
bat.
start arguing right off the bat?
Yeah, and then we'll make up.
Okay, we'll make up. So let's talk about this. I want to talk about Seven Secrets by Tom Taylor and Daniel D. Nicolo because, hold on, I have to figure out the cameras here. Okay, so poggers in the chat if you also pick up this book because I know you don't like this book. I love
you're
this
right.
book.
I don't. I'm trying to find it in my pile right now because I've got a like a little short box of all my current series that are going on. So I'm kind of off screen, but go ahead and you talk about why you like Seven Secrets.
Okay, can we agree on one thing first while you're digging? Because I'm
Oh
sure
my
that
God.
even though if you don't like this, I think that we'll agree on this. Can we at least agree that the characters in this book are really hot?
Oh, 100%. Like, I'm
I really
thirsty
love
for
Daniel D.
them.
Nicolo's art. Yeah, like I like the main characters, even Sigurd. I they're just cute as shit. And then the bad guy Amon is like, who is the guy?
Yeah.
Who is the guy that was in Charlie's Angels
Oh, I
and
don't
played the creepy
recall.
thin man? That's who he
Don't
reminds
recall.
me of. Is he
Okay.
reminds me of creepy thin man. So I guess that's just where we're at right now. So I almost didn't pick up Seven Secrets. I thought it was like going to be really, really overhyped.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that has happened with a couple of boom titles lately for me,
Mm-hmm.
and even with like image titles, is it just felt like everybody was talking about it. I'm like, and then I'm like, let me pick it up.
Dan and I feel like we call that the Kat Salazar effect because she does like the marketing for Image. So like, I'll get an email from Kat Salazar and like, this is a new series that's coming out. And I feel like some things are just so overhyped and I'm like, okay, I want to pick that up. And then I pick it up and I'm like, what?
Especially like that can go, I know we're like kind of derailing right now, but like Commanders in Crisis had like 20 different covers, and I'm not saying that it wasn't a bad story, but I'm saying that the way it was hyped, it had like 20 different covers for its first issue. It had all of these retailer variants. Seven Secrets was kind of similar, where I think this had a bunch of retailer variants as well. And it's like, to me, for an indie comic to have retailer variants, that is really ballsy. Because you are banking on these comics to sell and you're banking on not holding on to them. So, like, I understand when retailers, like, there's a bunch of the Batman and Catwoman retailer variants, which my wallet is crying over. But,
like, that's a main title. Like, of course, people are going to pick up the 10 different titles for that.
So I just think it's really ballsy when they do that. However, Seven Secrets, I picked up on a whim. I was like, I really like Tom Taylor. I don't think I've ever read anything by him that I don't like. His All New Wolverine, even his like Injustice Gods Among Us. He's got a really great way of writing characters and character development. I think that's why I really like him, is the way he personalizes his characters. And I think that's why I like Seven Secrets, because I don't know what's going on with the plot. I have no idea what's happening. But I love the characters and I love the concept behind it. And I know I said this in my video when I talked about my comic pool list, but it feels like Saga in a weird, strange way that I can't put my thumb on in terms of like the broken family and wanting to be together and things like that. And I really like that. Not only that, but Daniel D. Nicolo's art is just fucking insane. Like, it doesn't look like anything on the market right now. I think this and They Only Find Us When We're Dead, I think those are the two most gorgeous books on the market right now because they don't look like anything else.
No, I do. So when it comes to Seven Secrets, I think what it was for me, there was just a lot of stuff that I read that that week, whenever that first one came out, that
There was
I
a lot
think
of stuff. I remember that.
and I think that that week there were probably like 3 or 4 number 1 issues that came out, and I hated like every single one of them. Like I think that that week 90% of the
Don't
things
you
that I
hate when
bought,
that happens?
I was like, did everyone just decide? Like, I don't know if it's just me. Like, if I read things out of order, because
Mhm.
sometimes I feel like if I read things out of order, and it's like, should I have read this one first or this one first? Like, if I hate the first one that I read, I'm going to hate the rest of them. Or
It
maybe
puts
if
you in a
I,
bad mood.
it does. So I don't know if maybe that's what it was. And so I picked up issue number 1. I didn't love it. And I think what it was for me is that maybe I was speed reading through it, or maybe I
Mhm.
just wasn't catching what Tom Taylor was throwing down. But I think that there was just one line in it. Like, it's like, what's, to me, the whole plot after I left it was like, what's the 7 secrets? One of them was that, spoiler alert, like, she's pregnant or something,
Mhm.
and I just felt like that was a little bit tropey, and I'm like, really? And so I think that I did end up going back to issue number 2, I think, because you said that you liked it, and then Dan said that he also liked it, so I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I'll go ahead and I'll pick up issue number 2. Still didn't
And
catch
it
me
still
in the
didn't.
same way, but I
So
can
I
see,
feel
I've
like
heard.
if issue 2 doesn't grab you, I feel
Mhm.
like then it's just not for you, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Because to me, issue 2 is where I was like, all right, Tom Taylor has made me cry by his second issue. I'm in
Yeah.
for the long haul.
Yeah.
Let's do this. But again, it's just and we're not all going to have the same taste,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you come out of the woodworks and say that Saga is a bad book, then we might have to fight.
So I feel like when I've heard 1 or 2 people say that they don't like Saga, maybe just in passing, and I don't get it. I think there's not many things that I find wrong with it. And I don't know, I know I've spoken about this before, but when I was working at a comic book shop back in Florida,
Mhm.
someone came by, and it was someone who I felt like was going to be in the same kind of demographic as me, like kind of alt-looking female,
Yeah.
femme presenting person, and they were into comics, and I think that they liked sex criminals or something else, and I'm like, you've got to read Saga. Like, it's this like um Romeo and Juliet in space, but 1,000 times better.
Yeah.
And when I said Romeo and Juliet in space, they were like, ew. And then I'm like, fuck, that isn't really a good way to describe it, because it's so
No.
much better than that.
I always
Um,
tell people that it's like comic Star Wars. I
yeah, because
really do look at it like it's like its own, like I call it fucked up Star Wars because it is
yeah.
so bizarre and weird.
hmm Yeah. Like, maybe if Luke's parents didn't die and they tried to fight to save him or something. I don't
I
know.
mean, yeah.
I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, so I can't um I
Also,
don't
when is
know.
Saga coming back? Because at this point, listen, we're on year 3. I'm convinced Brian K. Vaughan has just ejected and it's never gonna come back. And if that happens, I might actually have to yeet
Yeah.
myself.
Through from what I've heard, and hey everyone, I want to go ahead, and if you haven't already met Luna, he knows exactly when to join. But I feel like when it comes to Saga, we heard like over 2 years ago, okay, we're going to take a year hiatus. Fiona Staples is going to give birth, and she wants to spend time with her newborn, and drawing is really hard, and
Mhm.
I keep hearing through lots of Saga groups that yes, it's coming back, but then every time a new previews comes out and it's not solicited, I'm like, please don't do this to me. I can understand why a million other series don't get rebooted or kind of like fall away, because especially because the creators are doing other things.
But it
But
feels like they're not doing anything right
the
now.
creators, from what I see, and like, that's understandable, like, focus on Saga, do your
Mhm.
thing. But I don't know if maybe they got burnt out, maybe if they're just really chugging along. They said that so this is going to be volume 9 that it ended out 2 years ago,
Mhm.
and this was going to be the halfway mark for the series. And so now it's been 2 years. So the only thing that I can think of is that maybe it's not actually going to be the halfway mark. Maybe they're just breezing along and they're going to finish it, which I might be okay with. because
I can't see how much longer it can go on, especially with, I'm going to spoil it because it's been 2 years, with basically half the cast being dead. It's really hard to continue a story like that. And like, I had a similar experience. So I met Brian K. Vaughan last year, last October at Baltimore Comic-Con, and I'm sure he hears it a million times, but I was genuinely like, you know, I love Saga. Like, do you have any word, anything you can give us, like, of when it would return? And he kind of just like did one of those like, ha ha ha, like, soon. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. Like, you can't give me an answer. You're just chuckling. So like, it might be a case that they're burnt out or they don't know what to do with it. And I was talking to somebody the other day and I was like, if that is how Saga ends, that would actually be a really interesting ending to think about, is that everything is kind of just awful and terrible. But at the same time, I don't want that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%. And I go back to that line: you either live long enough to become, or you either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
Yep.
And I think about that a lot when I think about some of my favorite series. And I know that like, that's kind of how I feel about Saga. I would almost rather see it end at volume 9, or maybe if they just ended up doing one volume
Like
10.
10, yeah.
And just, you know, if they finish it well, because I think that there's been plenty of series that just die out and I'm just like, I'm done picking this up. But speaking of which, what an interesting segue. You and I have a very similar opinion about this, and that's Die, the series. I would much rather see it end maybe next
And
volume
die.
and die, literally die. And this is something that we were talking about actually yesterday on Comic Chop News, is that can it end at issue 20, like a D20? And I know that it
That's
kind of like
smart.
right? And so I think that would be interesting. Apparently, Kieran Gillen did say something about doing 25 issues.
I thought he had confirmed that this was going to be the last arc. Like, they're taking a break now, and then this was going to be. I thought I saw something like on Twitter or an interview that he said that this is going to be the final arc.
I'm kind of hoping so. I feel like, so then that would mean issue 15, which comes out this week, is going to be, I think it comes out this week, is going to be the last issue, if that's so. I think that there's too much to wrap up in one issue. So I would really, really love to see it end in another 5 issues.
There's just too much going on in general. Like, this is a book that started off with a very simple presence. A bunch of kids get sucked into a D&D world. And then it kind of developed into like a, not like a civil war, but definitely like a divide. It split the party.
They split the party.
Split the party.
You never split the party in D&D.
Between do we want to go home or do we want to stay here because our lives are arguably better here? And I feel like if you had just taken that concept rather than adding in this whole holy war that's going on and adding in, you know, these different factions that are coming into play, and then now throwing H.G. Wells and the fact that they aren't the first ones to have been here, and the apocalypse that supposedly, apparently, did I read that right? That is breaching on the other side because it's 2020, it's got to end. But you could have just taken this simple topic and it could have focused, it could have become like a Lord of the Flies sort of situation where it's a matter of just, you know, the turmoil and the split between the party and how, yeah, our lives suck out here and our lives are better here. But no, wait, my life is still good there and we can't do anything unless we all agree. And I just feel like we've lost a lot of the character development. And I think that is what, at least for me, that is what I loved about Die, is not only the different character classes and how unique they were with, you know, a Godbringer and having a Neo in a D&D world. And then, of course, having Matt, you know, having a sword that, you know, is fueled by his pain and by his grief. These were really interesting tropes that we hadn't seen before. And I just feel like it's gone off the rails. And I hate that.
100%. I agree. Like I love the series. I love the concept. I love Stephanie Hahn's art. Like I will
oh my God,
read anything that she does. But I think that we need to see the series wrap up. I do think that they can do that in the next, I think that Gillen can do that in the next couple of issues. I don't want to see it go on like Wicked and Divine did. I think that went on just like a pinch too long. It was
went
a
on
really good
way too
series.
long.
It could have easily just been like a 5-volume series, but I understand, like, their writers, go ahead and do it. I want to go ahead and say in the comments, hi, Tacoma Comics. He says the token stuff worked very well. I agree. The Bronte stuff, I kind of liked the Bronte stuff.
I kind of liked when
yeah.
I went and looked, when I actually went and did research on Glasstown and I realized that it was
Yeah.
real. I think that and I hate that I had to do this and do like outside research because I feel like you should be able to do it in your. Yeah, but I feel like you should be able to present it in your book for somebody to understand. I feel like I had a better understanding on it, but I agree. And then the H.G. Wells stuff.
Yeah.
What? Help.
Here's what I'm hoping, that if they do like one more arc, and Kieran Gillen, I know that you watch this show. I know that you subscribe to the channel, so I know you're listening. So let me just put this bug in your ear. I would really love to see, because I always think now, like, who's going to be the literary figure that pops up in the next arc? I would really love to see some modern D&D heroes show up. Like, I'm not too familiar with a lot of them, but I would love to see like people from Critical Role and the guild. I can't think of the
that
one
would be interesting, yeah.
the redheaded woman's name, but I really love Matt Mercer. And I really love Satine Phoenix. Like, both of them, I have total crushes on. Like, both of them could totally crush me, would be down for it. So I'd really love to see some modern, like, D&D storytellers pop up.
Because it's a book about D&D.
Like, it is, but it isn't. Like, I get that, like, they can't really, like, say it is, because it goes into, like, these other, like, the Prussia, and the
it's a role-playing game,
yeah,
at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I think it'd be really cool to see some, like, those figures, like little nods to modern D&D.
And Tacoma Comics brought up a good point that I actually wanted to talk about, and that's the fact that it reads way better in trade after the first arc. They really read better in trade. Yeah. So in a way, yes, but in a way, no. So I'm going to bring my boy Tom King into this, as I always do.
This is a safe place here. You can bring
Dan's
Tom
not
King
here. I can talk about Tom King.
He's going to watch this later and be like, I can't believe you guys talked about Tom King.
Bitch, I'm excluding her from our Thanksgiving drink-a-thon. So Tom King, I swear by that man's writing. I think he's one of the best minds in comics right now. I struggle to read him issue by issue. He is a writer that once he is collected, it is good. Yeah. And for a second, I thought that this is how it was with Die outside of that first arc, because that first arc reads beautifully, whether you read it in single issues or read it in the arc. When it came to the second volume, I felt I was losing it. I was kind of losing it with the single issues. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I bought the trade. I was like, let me read it by trade. I'm going to read volume 1 and then I'm going to go straight into volume 2. And that was when the third arc was coming back up. I did that right in between. And I was a little bit more aware of what was going on in volume 2, but I was still fucking lost. So it's not a matter of, it reads better in trade. It's not a Tom King book. It's not like a self-contained story. At the end of the day, and I preach by this, I hate saying it because I do love his work, Kieran Gillen gets convoluted very, very fast. When we look at his first volumes for Darth Vader, for Young Avengers, for Wicked, for Die, those are all solid books. And like his Darth Vader and Die Volume 1 in particular, I will preach about in being some of the best contained stories in comics, period. But then it starts to kind of lose itself and we don't know what's happening. And I'm so excited for you to finally read that.
I read some of the first issues, and 100% I loved it. And I do want to go ahead and bring up Dr. Aphra, because I love his Dr. Aphra. Love it so much. Thank you for creating Dr. Aphra. Sorry, I had to bring that up.
No, I love
Kieran
Dr.
Gillen.
Aphra.
Yeah.
And here's hoping that she gets a Disney Plus series, because there's hardcore rumors. And listen, I would like to see a queer woman in Star Wars for once in my life that isn't just like, oh, by the way, look, she kissed that girl in the background, but when it goes to China, we're gonna cut it. I don't want that. Give me a queer character in Star Wars.
We deserve more.
But yeah, Die, I feel like we could go on like forever about it and just kind of scream about it, but I think it's because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it's series that me and you are both very, very passionate on. So I don't know.
100%. I think it's hard because I really do love the series, and it's hard to say I want this series to end, but I let it end. I'm okay with it. You know.
And like what's weird is like I also kind of want to see more die. Like bring in like a new set of characters, like keep the same world, but
Yes.
bring in different characters, bring in a new
Hmm.
group. Maybe that's what they're gonna do with future arcs. Who knows? But like
Yeah.
leave the convoluted stuff out of it. Just make it about the inner turmoil between these kids and like make it be that. Like
100% agree. Um, Another one thing that I do, I know that you and I are kind of like moving, like switching topics here from die, but I do think that one of the things that I think that we pretty much like agree on is Mad Cave Studios as a comic book
listen,
publisher is
listen.
so underappreciated, so underrated, and I think that like I feel like I'm passionate about like talking about them and picking them up, like Stargazer, Dryfoot. There's like
Villainous.
Villainous. There's several titles, and I'm not sure if you picked this one up this week. And I really love it. Is Terminal Punks? Did you pick
I
this one
have it
up?
in my Dropbox. I have not
Okay.
picked it up yet, but Mad Cave is it's such a bizarre publisher because they've been around for a little while, and
Hmm.
I don't mean any disrespect, but I've kind of seen their stuff for a while and it really did not interest me. They had like Wolvenheart and there was Show's End and there was something else that they had done, and none of these books really like dragged me in.
No.
And then they reached out to me to read their stuff, and it was like,
Hmm.
to me it felt like they were almost doing like a soft relaunch. They had Stargazer
Hmm.
coming out. There it is.
Yep.
It's Stargazer coming out. They had Dryfoot coming out,
Yep.
Villainous, Terminal Punks, Hollywood Trash, things like that.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Hmm.
yeah, let me check out these books. And Dryfoot was really, really great. Dryfoot
Yep.
was fun. It was lighthearted. I feel like it can get very dark very quick. It reminded me a lot of Four Kids Walk into a Bank, which is one of
Yep.
my all-time favorite books. But if I had to call one book, and this is on my pull list, so it's a really great like segue. Look at us
Hmm.
go.
Ooh.
Stargazer also reminds me of Die, which is
Yeah.
another really great segue. So this book, if you're not reading it, I honestly think that this could be a contender, and if it's not, I'm going to be upset, but I think this could be a contender for an Eisner.
Yeah.
I think that, Anthony Cleveland and Antonio Fuso, they're doing stellar work on this miniseries, and it like twists everything that you know and makes you second guess things, and like the style of it is just completely different. So if you like sci-fi and like mystery and psychological thrillers, like definitely be reading it right now.
Hmm.
And just read Mad Cave in general, because they're just such
Yeah.
an awesome, like they're right up there with Volt Comics. I really love these smaller indie publishers because
Yep.
they care about people like me and you that are out here and talking about their books and promoting their books without any like sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like compensation, for lack of a better word. Like
Yeah.
they see us and they're like, hey, like I'm gonna retweet that, or I'm gonna reach out to
Yep.
this person and thank them personally. Whereas like Aftershock Comics, I've been preaching them for literal freaking years, and I
Hmm.
can't even get them to retweet something that I do.
Yep. And one thing that I do love about Mad Cave Studios, and obviously most of the stuff that I read is going to be indie heavy. Like I focus on more
Mm-hmm.
independent work than necessarily the big two. Like I feel like I'll usually pick up the first issue of maybe like a big two if I like the character, and then maybe I'll read the trade several years later, depending on the character.
Exactly.
But when it comes to a lot of indie titles, like obviously that's where my heart is. Usually that's the majority of what's going to be on my pull list. And one thing that I really love about Mad Cave Studios is that the quality is really there. Like when I think about indie stories and what the gold, the high bar, the
Mm-hmm.
gold standard for indie publishing right now is Image comic books, hands down. And a lot of times with other indie publishers, indie comic book publishers, the quality is hit or miss, right? Because of maybe the publishing quality of like the book that you have in your hand. Like maybe there just wasn't an editor there who was going to say, okay, you need to move the panels this way, or I'm going to edit
Mm-hmm.
maybe the placement of the bubbles. Like seriously, little things like that can make or break a book, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And so with Mad Cave, pretty much every single thing that I have read has been incredible quality. And it could easily be an Image quality book.
Oh, for
And
sure.
The author, Jared Lujan of Dryfoot,
I
ended
love
up
him. He's so amazing.
yeah, and so I think that, like, to me, like, that's what I see with Mad Cave, is because 10 years ago with Image, that's how most of those books really got big, is because the creators were so thoughtful. They were going to conventions, they were going out and doing things. Like, I think especially about Kelly Sue DeConnick and like everything that she's done, I feel like she's really good about like promoting her own stuff directly to her fans instead of like other ways. So I think it's really amazing that the creators of those stories have autonomy with their publisher to say, I'm going to reach out to these people and like give them copies of the book. And that's what happened with Terminal Punks, is that I got a copy of this and I read it and I love it. I want to buy 5 copies of this first issue because it's so good.
Yeah, exactly. And like, they're obviously doing something right, because when we look at Stargazer and Dryfoot respectively, they went to second printings literally on the day of publishing, if not like the day before.
Yep.
It's insane. So it's definitely a publisher that I think that everybody should be on the lookout for. Start to pick up their number ones as they come out, because there are going to be some hardcore sleeper hits that people just don't realize.
I think Stargazer is going to be one of them, because I could easily see Stargazer being like a Netflix show.
Oh, totally.
Hands down, could see it being a Netflix show. So I think that in probably maybe like 2 years time, maybe whenever this one has a first volume collected, and that, depending on how far out it goes, if it ends up being a limited series or goes further.
I think Stargazer is only about 5 or 6 issues.
I think that's like, it's one of those limited series, but I seriously think that's going to be a contender, like you said, for best
new series,
Eisner Award, for sure. And I think that these are going to be some up and coming creators, that these are going to be the books. And I don't want to be that show that's like, oh, these are going to be the hot books, you better buy it.
Exactly. This is not the speculators being told to go and pick up these books. No, this is you supporting a publisher that deserves your support. This is you picking up and reading really great stories and kind of being like oh, well, I've already read that. It's not for you to go and flip these books. Don't do it. We will find you. Don't do it.
Cut you. So another publisher that I feel like we talked about Vault Comics, which is another indie publisher, and once again, high quality stuff. And I feel like they are doing really, really well getting these like niche genres. Like, they're really good at doing horror and science fiction, but with also like a slice of life. So titles like what's one
Autumn Knoll.
The Autumn Knoll.
Autumn Knoll is so Autumn Knoll. Is Autumn Knoll on your pull list? Because it's
I think that, once again, I think
it's
that's
insane.
one of the ones. It's not on my pull list, but it's one that just ends up there because I have a fantastic shop. So in the comments, I just want to go ahead and say hi to Tacoma Comics, hi to Gore. It sounds like there is some love for Bitch Planet in the comments, so I'm loving that. Hero and the Kid says that the plot is their favorite Volt title, and I feel like if you like the plot, you will probably end up enjoying the Autumnal as well.
So I didn't like the plot. It is the one. So I preach Volt Comics. I've been preaching Volt Comics since they started with Heathen. But and everybody was talking about the plot. And I was so excited to finally get my hands on the plot. And it was the one. It was the one first issue that something happened. My shop couldn't get it, and it immediately went to multiple printings. They couldn't get them either. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna wait for the trade. And I was just really disappointed by it. I say I like horror, but I'm not like a horror super fan. So I feel like for me it was just a bit of a slow burn, but I can definitely resonate with what you said, that if you did like the plot, you'll definitely like
it's
Autumn Knoll. It's different. I feel like Autumn Knoll is a little quicker pace. I feel like there's a little bit more characterization in Autumn Knoll, which again is something that I constantly say that I like in my comics. and is something I gravitate towards. But it has that same creepy vibe, creepy family secrets, Silent Hill, creepy monsters sort of vibe to it. So yeah, read Autumnal because it is bonkers. And I think Volt just sent me issue 3, so I'm really excited to read that because it's getting real good real quick.
Yeah. Another indie publisher who I like, and I feel like I really want to like them and have like a semi-personal connection to them, is Scout Comics. Because they are based out of Fort Myers, Florida, and I used to live there, and I went to like their headquarters, and they're super nice, and I really like them. But some of the stuff, I feel like the quality is a little bit all over the place. I like some of the stories, but I feel like it's usually pretty hit or miss when it comes to Scout Comics. I really love the title Gut Ghost, and I think one of the reasons why is that it feels like a zine to me, like the way that it's put together, the way that it's stylized. It just looks like a cute little zine, and it's just wacky as shit, and I love that. And I loved Canopus because that was such a weird title. And there's a couple others that I like, but then like I said, the quality is sometimes there and sometimes it's not. So I still really like them. I try to pick up some of the things, but then I feel like Mad Cave, Vault, and I feel like there's another indie one that I'm missing, but
those are the two big ones though that are really consistent. And like Scout is exactly what you said, it's hit or miss. They've got some really great titles coming up that I'm really excited for, like Frank Goes Home to the Farm or something like that.
Yeah, that comes out next week. Yeah,
Frank Going Home to the Farm I'm really excited about. And then there's another one that was actually just on this previews list, so it's not going to come out until January. But it has to do with like reincarnations and living forever and things like that. So I'm excited to see more from them because arguably, I don't think I have too much experience with them. I know that I was reading Hench Girl, and I got like the first ever like issue of Hench Girl from Baltimore Comic Con by the creator just tabling, and like I really liked that. So,
is it Kristen Nuds?
Yes.
So I know that Hench Girl, I don't know if it was originally Dark Horse and then Scout or vice versa. I haven't read it. I did pick up the trade. Dan actually recommended it to me, but I haven't read it yet. Sorry,
it's
Dan.
A lot of
fun. But it looks really good, and it's actually a show coming out now. So I'm curious to see. I'm hoping that it gets a little bit more popular because it seems like it's a really beloved series by everyone who's read it. Really quick, I want to say hi to Robo. In case anyone hasn't ever seen, I freaking love comics. You guys are amazing. Usually it's Judah who pops up in the comments, so it's cool to see you here, Robo. Thank you for stopping by. So there was another title that I was thinking of, and it came out the same week as the Autumnal, and that's Unkindness of Ravens. What are your thoughts on that?
So, Unkindness of Ravens, I think it was another case of there was a lot that came out that week. I think that was that also when We Only Find Them When They're Dead came out? There was a lot that came out that week, if I remember correctly, and I didn't hate it. But I didn't immediately be like, all right, I need to read the next issue. That for me was more like I'm going to wait until it's compiled into a trade and then I'm going to read it or pick it up from my library. But I like the idea behind it. I like that it feels like Mean Girls meets, what's the Craft.
I think of The Craft.
I don't know why I couldn't think of that. It's literally Mean Girls meets The Craft. I really liked that, and it's really quirky, and I feel like it's definitely going to drag in those two target audiences. I also really loved the character designs of our like craft witches or whatever you want to call them. I really like the character designs, but like I said, that first issue, to me, a first issue really has to do something spectacular and amazing to drag me in because I am so picky. And it barely missed it, but it is definitely one that I'm going to pick up in trade format. What did you think about it?
I really enjoyed it. That was if this is the week that I'm thinking of, it was a very heavy week. I did end up buying a lot of stuff that week. I think that was the same week that Dune House Atreides came out, and I ended up buying like 10 copies of that and then splurged on like every single variant cover that I could get, especially the Paul Pope one because I love Paul Pope. But I think that week I ended up spending over $200 at the comic book store in
Oh
1
my
week.
God.
And I'm not saying that that's not typical, because normally it lands around the $100 mark. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a pinch less, depending on how many paperbacks that I pick up. But, you know, you're right. That was a very heavy week.
That week. Like, I'm trying to like pull up the Instagram post because I'm pretty sure I made one.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember it being massive.
Yep. I think for me, it was really massive, mostly because of all of the Dune variant covers that I ended up picking up. Let me see.
Speaking of, because I feel like September and October, it was like balls to the wall insane with how many new series that were coming out that were just so interesting and so unique. Another one from Aftershock Comics was Lonely Receiver, which is another book where it's like, I like it. I see where this is going, but I don't like it enough to put on my pull list, but I'm going to buy it in the trade. It was bizarre. That was a book that I felt like I had to read 2 or 3 times to kind of understand what was going on. And then it kind of depressed me a little. I'm like, you
100
and then your girlfriend rejects you? What the fuck?
100%. It is a 100% an episode of Black Mirror.
Oh,
that is one that is on my pull list. I read issue number 1 and I'm like, I love it. I need it on my pull list. I feel like you really get it on issue number 2. Okay. I read issue number 3, and once again it really goes balls to the wall. I feel like there needs to be a ladies version of Balls to the Wall. Like, we'll come up with that later. Yeah, without being like
vulgar.
Tits to the pits. I don't know. Like, there also needs to be like a them's version of it. Like,
a non-binary version.
Yeah. So anyone in the comments, feel free. Maybe not in here because the comment may not end up popping up. But it was
bizarre. It was weird, and it was something we hadn't ever seen before, and it was a really bizarre, like you said, Black Mirror experience. Mm-hmm. And then since we're on the topic of Aftershock Comics, one of my absolute favorite series right now, if I can figure out where it went, is We Live. Like, this book, this is gonna be I feel like another really big contender for an Eisner Award. This book is absolutely insane. I'm personally a huge fan of Inaki Miranda because he did some artwork for Catwoman during like the last 5 or so issues of the New 52, and I absolutely love his style. But to see, and I'm a sucker for post-apocalyptic stuff. Like, that is my jam. I love it, and then it stresses me out. But like, I love a post-apocalyptic stuff so much, and it's such an easy genre that can be overdone and feel like the same thing very quickly, and this doesn't. This feels like something entirely new, entirely different. The fact that they are using like a Studio Ghibli, Hayao Miyazaki style with the bright colors and the bright color character design, and then hits you with like this fucking dark shit, and it's like people are dying, children are dying. It's I'm really like, I finished this one, and this was one of those ones because that first page, the first 2 or 3 pages,
because it's the older,
it's very dense, and I'm like, oh, I don't like this. I'm not gonna like this. Don't want it, and I'm very sad. But then as you're reading through, and especially once you get to that scene, because I won't spoil it just in case anybody has not read it yet, because you totally should be reading it.
Yes.
But once you get to that scene, I was like, all right, you got me. I want to see. You got me. I want to see what's going to go on next. This one is just going to be insane, and I feel like this one could be massive and could overstay its welcome, and I hope that it doesn't do that, but I'm excited.
I'm almost positive that We Live is going to be a limited series. Here on the Kid brings up an interesting thing, is that Origins by Boom Studio came out last week. So it was the week after this came out, and I feel like both of them are pretty similar. And I feel like that tends to happen sometimes with, especially with indie publishers, right, that are, separate, is that these ideas come out around the same time that focus on like this post-apocalyptic world, but they are two completely different stories. I don't want to say that I love one more than the other because I feel like both of them have very interesting concepts. But what I really, really enjoy about We Live, and you mentioned this in your pull list video on your YouTube, is how this one has like this little fallout guide, or it feels like a fallout guide to the apocalypse.
Like
So I love those.
this.
I love when comics end up doing that like multimedia type thing. And not just that, but there's also little, for anyone who hasn't been reading this, there's also little QR codes in here that you can scan. And when you scan them, it brings you to YouTube with like a little soundtrack. Like, I think that is just so adorable. I think that I've seen it done before, like where music goes along with the story. But I really think that there's going to be a new era where things like that start happening in comic books a lot, where it's like, okay, here's a link to bring you somewhere else. And I think that this is going to be one of those books where we're like, okay, we really see the start here of things like that. Now, so I will go ahead and say, I loved in Bitch Planet, to bring that up again, how we get this like multimedia presence where we get ads in the book. Like, I won't really go too much into it. I loved that. Now I feel like one book that is recent that's been doing that I really liked issue number 1, but then stopped liking some of the issue 2 and 3 is Spy Island by Chelsea Cain. Chelsea Cain, so disappointed. Yes. So disappointed with Man Eaters and how that ended up. I'm not going to go ahead and talk about it now. Maybe I'll do it at a later time. But I really enjoyed issue 1 of Spy Island, where it's basically like James Bond goes to the Bermuda Triangle. So it was kind of fun, but I felt like in issues 2 and 3, I get a 30-something page comic book, and half of it is like ads for dumb shit that happens on the island. And in that one, I feel like it was overcompensating with those things rather than putting substance into the story, where in a story like We Live, the supplemental material, like the little like guide to the apocalypse and how we're going to survive and things like that, totally complemented it and did not overdo it.
And not only that, but it also gave you like answers to things that I didn't even realize that I was like wondering. So it's like, what happens if a child gets a bracelet and then somebody else gets the bracelet or takes the bracelet? So it kind of explained that, and I'm excited to see if this is just an issue 1 thing, or if we're going to continue and kind of at the end do a different like teaching moment or learning lesson rather. Because I hear the little Fallout music in my head, and I hear like the little like audio that they do, and I dig this book so much. And like I said, Aftershocks is a comic or publisher that I've been preaching for years. They publish some of my favorite books, like Animosity, which is another really great apocalyptic book. They also do Insects and Clan Killers as well. But
they did Alters as well. I loved that one.
Exactly. They did Alters, but I feel like aside from this Undone by Blood book that they did recently, and the only reason why that's getting traction is because it got picked up by the Norman Reedus production company, and now the book is spiking in price, and all the flippers want to grab it. But it feels like We Live is actually a book that is getting traction because people want to read it, and it's a solid story. So I feel like they're finally putting that publisher on the map. And that makes me really excited to see what more they come through with. Because I feel like they've also been a publisher that have been very hit or miss in terms of their stories, in terms of their artwork, in terms of their production quality. So excited to see more from these guys.
For sure. And you're right. I feel like a lot of speculators, there's a couple of titles like Something is Killing the Children that I feel like speculators have now all of a sudden come to appreciate. And it's like, I feel like I've been here since the beginning reading this title, and I genuinely want to read it and not just flip it.
Yeah.
And I have, you know, like I'll have an issue 1 of that series sitting, and I'm like, do I want to sell it for $50 or do I want to keep it since I already have?
So real talk. This is going to sound really horrible because I do love Something is Killing the Children. I read the first 5 issues as it came out. I read the trade. Have not read an issue since.
Okay.
But it's still on my pull list. But then I see like issue 7 or 8 has gone to second printing and is selling for $15. And I'm like, I'm just going to keep this on my pull list as like an investment. If I get into another car accident again and I have to sell my collection, that will be the first thing to go. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I don't have that much attachment to the series. Now, granted, I am in that constant struggle of would I keep that Jenny Frisian #1 cover or not? Because like one of my things too is I was really upset that I didn't get both covers when it first came out because I was like, let me get this Jenny Frisian cover because I know that that's going to pop off because Jenny Frisian stuff always does. I was like, but there's something about the design and style of issue 1, how it's very minimal, and then you just have the title huge that I, as a graphic designer, I loved.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited that for local comic shop day, they were re-releasing that cover, but now it's foil or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, at least now I have the really cool design and I can hang it up when I want to. But yeah, Something is Killing the Children is definitely an investment. Again, not encouraging flippers, but it's like, hey, if I already have the book and it's worth something, you know, why hold on to it?
It's so funny because I do go back and forth between that, like, do I want to sell? Do I want to be one of these people? Like, for instance, Strange Academy came out. I picked up issue #1. Like, it was a really fun issue. And then I see it selling for $70 right now. And I literally have it right here. And I'm like, I would sell this shit to someone for like $30. I liked the series, but I'm not like that attached to it.
Not only that, but think about how many more comics you could buy with it.
100%. The thing about like wanting to flip and like thinking about investments, and this is something that I don't know if I feel like good about. So I'm usually the comic book buyer. My partner does like a little bit and did a while back. And so there's this app called CLZ Comics where you can like go in and scan your comic books and you can see what you have. And like the top 2 or 3, like my partner, I mean, granted, they're my comic books when we really think about it because, so anyways, but he has Edge of Spider-Verse 2. And he just had it sitting there, had no fucking clue that it was worth $400 something right now. Bought it for cover price a couple years ago. Yeah. Same with, and so that was first appearance of Gwen Stacy. He also has issue number 3 and 4 of NYX, first appearance of X-23, bought it years ago for cover price. And so like, honestly, like for flipper, for people who do speculate and for people who do flip, like it may not seem like I just pick up everything. I pick up one of everything. So I have all of these things that I paid $3 for, some of them that are now worth $200.
And there is something weird about like that instant boost of serotonin of like, hey, I paid $1 for this. Cause like I picked up the first appearance of Captain Marvel when I first started collecting comics because my whole thing when I first started reading was I'm just going to pick up things that have pretty ladies on the cover. And I picked up that Avenging Spider-Man issue because Terry Dodson's art was gorgeous. It had Captain Marvel. I was like, she's cool. I love her. And there were so many times where I was like, I'm just going to sell this to like a local shop for like $1. It's no big deal. Yeah. And then one day I was looking at like, I look at the Key Collector app, which tells you key issues, things like that. And it was like, oh, this is the first appearance as Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel. And I was like, excuse me? I have what?
Like, how did that happen?
I immediately went and stuck it in one of those really nice polythene bags. And I was like, yeah, I own the first appearance of Captain Marvel. That's pretty rad. Because it's like the first appearance of like a piece of history. So like, I'm going to derail because it's still bonkers to me to think about.
Let's derail.
It's sitting on not in my closet, but on a shelf. A friend of mine Her mom's ex-boyfriend or whatever had a box of comics that he had left in her closet for like 5 years. So at that point, it's like finders keepers, these are mine. And she bought me the box to go through and look at because I'm like, she's like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Let me have you take a look at it and do whatever you want. So she sent it home with me. I bought it home, was going through it at like 2 a.m, was digging through it. And I'm like, okay, Web of Spider-Man #1. I'm like, that's like a $20 book. Like, oh, okay. I see what we're doing here. No big deal. I go through, I find the first appearance of Boba Fett in Star Wars, which is like, as we know, like $125 comic. And I'm like, okay, like that's pretty fucking insane. So I'm digging through the box and like these books are like, most of them aren't boarded, they're just bagged. And after being in a box for years, they got that like sticky where you have to peel it apart and it smells and you're like, ugh.
You're like, dang it.
And the second to last book I pulled out of the box was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1. And I fell to my knees in my kitchen and I'm like, called her on the phone and I was like, I need you to come get this right now. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, you have a $5,000 book in this box. And she's like,
yep.
What? And I'm like, you have the first ever Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And she still hasn't gotten it. And I'm like, listen here, buddy. It's been a year or two. I need you to figure out what you're doing with this. Because like, listen, I don't like having that much money.
They're like foster kids now. Like at this point, you just need to adopt them.
I have to adopt them. But then it's like, hypothetically, not that I would, but hypothetically, if I had a book like that, what would I do with it? Would I cash in on the $5,000? Because that is a lot of money. It's a lot of money that somebody like me could use right now. But at the same time, it's such an integral part of history. It is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What do you do with something like that? I mean, do you like looking through your collection and knowing that you have some of these books that you and your partner paid cover price for, but it's like, that could be like rent. That could be like a new car or a new whatever it is that we need. Like, do you ever go through that?
Sometimes, yes. So like sometimes when I think like, okay, if shit goes really south and I like absolutely need this like $1,000, I know that I would need to sell some of these things. Now, granted, I have right now like 4 long boxes of stuff that I'm planning on selling, and I don't really know how to start. I don't know if I just need to do like a new Instagram and just like do Instagram selling, or if I should take the hit and use eBay or whatever. But I've got about 4 long boxes worth of stuff that I want to get rid of, and because ultimately I do want to go ahead and I need to buy a new computer. I want to buy a new phone, things like that. So I'm like, okay, that could be my investment to do that. And with the CLZ app, I was just looking and I have maybe like a third of my collection, a quarter of my collection scanned into CLZ comic books. And it says that just that is $10,000 worth.
Like that's insane.
And so I'm just like, I need to take the time and I need to go through and scan everything, because I know like if I took a week and just sold comic books for a week, I could like easily make a couple thou, which is nice. But at the same time, it's like I will never get rid of Saga #1. I will never get rid of Sandman #8. I'll never get rid of those, but and I'll probably not get rid of NYX #3 and Edge of Spider-Verse 2, but
it's so amazing to think that these are pieces of paper that at one point or another we might have paid $2, $3, $4 for, and now they're worth like
I have one and I have no clue what it is. And it's Star Wars Galaxy Edge, some random one, and it's worth $120. And I have no clue why. I have absolutely zero clue why it's worth that much. But I'm like, I would sell it to someone for like $80 and just be like, whatever. So anyways, follow me on Instagram. Maybe I'll go ahead and do a sale. Yeah, we totally derailed. So I do want to go ahead and mention a couple comments. I want to go ahead and mention Captain. I don't know if you can see the comments here.
Some as they pop up.
I do want to go ahead and say hi to Captain. I don't know if it's Saro or Sorrow. I think it's Saro. But she is a new comic book YouTuber, and she's absolutely fantastic. Has a couple videos up. Would love to see more. Would love to like have you like, if we collaborate and do some stuff, that would be amazing. And I do want to go ahead and say, mention a comment. Robo from I Freaking Love Comics says, listening to you talk about comics makes me very insecure about how I talk about comics. This is some smart stuff. So I really appreciate that, Robo, because when I watch you, Judah, and Ree talk about comic books, like I think that you folks are really smart, and you like especially some of the guests that you have on your show, so smart, especially because they're people who are doing like comic books journalism with like comic book resources and all of that, like you all. So I really appreciate that. I do also want to go ahead and say, Hero and the Kid asked if anyone is reading Sarah in the Royal Stars. Yes.
I read the first issue and have the trade.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. It's just one of those things I don't know what happened. I just never got around to reading it, but I like that it feels like a Red Sonja book, especially because Red Sonja has kind of burned me right now. Okay, Red Sonja didn't burn me, but Dynamite burned me.
I was just about to say, like, I do love Red Sonja. I'm not crazy about Dynamite right now. I feel like most of they come out with like 2 titles and it's just 100 variants for each. And
yes, but I'm the target audience, Jen, because I will buy 12 different covers of Red Sonja because she looks cute on the cover. And I feel like we're derailing again, but I feel like when Dynamite pulled their dumbass stunt, then all of a sudden they were publishing all of these really, really cute covers. They had Peach Momoko on covers, and there was just other people that were doing their covers. And I'm like, oh, I want to buy them, but I can't. You're not allowed. Maybe if I find them in a $1 or a $2 bin at a convention one day, I can do that because I'm not directly supporting Dynamite. But Dynamite has made me very sad.
Yeah, there's no Dynamite titles on my pull list right now. And it's a shame because I do love Red Sonja. I do love Vampirella. Maybe, like you said, dumpster diving, dollar bin diving eventually. I do want to go ahead and say to Hero and the Kid, thank you so much for stopping by. It sounds like you're going to go do some comic book hunting. I would love to know what you got. If you're still listening, thank you.
Also, be safe and wear your mask.
100%. COVID is real and it's out there. And I'm actually, I don't know if you can see my shirt, but it says Stay Home, Read Comics. It's done by this really cool group, Marvel by the Month, which is a podcast, and they're here in Portland, Oregon, and they're super nice. And I want to say hi to Chaos in Comics. It's so good to see you. Once again, another person who has some fantastic YouTube videos. I just watched one last night where you were talking about your polls, so keep coming out with those cool videos. Oh, and Glitter and Duct Tape is here. Thank you so much for being here. So another thing, I know that we did kind of derail and we talked a lot about like indie comic books. And that could obviously be something that I know you and I could talk about for days, like
for hours, days, years.
Days. Like, I'm not sure how much time I get on live stream, but I know it's like maybe 20 hours a month. Can we just talk for the next 20 hours? But I know that when it comes to stuff like Marvel and DC, like what would you say on your pull list is like the percentage of like the big 2, Marvel and DC?
Oh, like absolutely nothing. It sounds so. It's really weird because like when I first started collecting, and like I go and I look through old Instagram photos at my weekly pulls, and it's like I used to read nothing but DC comics, and like I'm like, oh, what happened? And I'm like, oh, it's because DC's not really publishing really good stuff right now. However, I think I only have one. No, I have 2. Technically, I have 3 DC comics on my pull list right now. One doesn't count though because I haven't read it since like issue 7, and I'm just collecting covers at this point. I'll read it eventually, but Catwoman is still really good. Ram V's writing it now, so I trust that it's really good.
Oh.
I haven't gotten caught up. I'm so far behind, but Ram V being on it, I'm like, all right, this is a guy that I trust.
Yeah.
Really good work.
Really quick, when we talk about, I'm not sure if it's Ram V, and I apologize, like if I'm saying it incorrectly.
Yeah, totally apologize. I can't pronunciate.
So I believe you recommended These Savage Shores to me. Read it and I loved it 100%. It probably would have
good.
It ended up making like kind of a notable mention on like top horror comic books of like modern comic books
For
over the
sure.
last couple years. And he also did, like, seriously, I've been thinking a lot about like what are my top comic books for the year. Like 2020 was a dumpster fire of a year. We had 3 or 4
You're gonna
months
say
where
Blue and Green?
Blue and Green
I haven't
was
read it
so
yet.
good. It was so good. Chat, anyone watching this, whoever, my neighbors who are around me, who can hear me probably, read Blue and Green. I don't want to like hype this book up and then have people read it and be like, I didn't get the hype. So I don't want to hype it too much, but seriously, Blue and Green was probably my favorite book that I read this year. I may have to go back and be like, okay, wait, what did I read in January? What did I read in February? But seriously, Blue and Green by Ram V is going to be like on the top of my
That makes me
list.
excited. I'll have to
Yeah.
add it to my higher up on my TBR list because I just really like anything that he writes, and he's such a down to earth dude. And he's also writing Justice League Dark right now, and I feel like a lot of people really. I haven't been reading it because again, DC I've been having problems with right now, but
Yeah.
a lot of people seem to really like him, and I feel like he tends to thrive in those sort of occult horror, like Lovecraftian type stories in a way. So and it's really awesome to see from somebody that's a person of color, because I feel like with a lot of horror we see it as generic white dudes writing horror, and like with these Savage Shores in particular, it was a cultural horror experience that you could tell he had a background in. And
100%.
I don't know how it comes across in Blue and Green, but again, just seeing him take on this horror genre that has been dominated so long by white people, it's really exciting to see this new take in storytelling.
He did, let me think. He did do there was a DC Swamp Thing that just came out. It was like the Halloween special. I believe he did some stories in there. There was also another, The Damned and the Doomed, I think, that came out. That may have come out the week after Halloween, so like 2 weeks ago. And I didn't like any of the stories in The Damned and the Doomed, with the exception of, I think, the ones that he did. So I loved what he was doing with DC horror. So I'm really excited to see anything that he does. And I do want to take maybe a moment in a little bit to talk about what's going on with Future State, what you've seen, and all of that. But really quick, since we're kind of like on the topic of horror, I mean, we talked about Aftershock. So one title that I picked up this last week was Miskatonic. And basically, just to give a quick rundown, lady detective, breaking glass ceilings and things like that, ends up going into Innsmouth and ends up fighting racist demons. And I feel like we've seen a lot of that, like especially thinking about Bitter Root, which is a fantastic title.
And also, when you say that, it also reminds me of Black Magic from Greg Rucka and Nicolo.
Oh yeah, yep. So, but here's what I would have to say about Miskatonic is that I feel like this one is having a really good conversation about what it means to fight sexism and fight racism. But I think that it missed the mark because we only see one female character in the book so far in this first issue, and people of color are only in the background. So I think that, and I'm not sure if you've watched Lovecraft Country on HBO. I loved it, and I think that hit the mark really, really well for so many damn reasons. It was so good, and it battled those conversations about sexism, racism, homophobia, and bigotry. It did all of that, and it did it with a diverse cast. This is doing it, but it's whitewashed, and I liked it, but I wish that it just pushed the envelope a little bit, you know.
Is it written? The creative team? Is it? Do you know who the creative team is? Is it a female or is it?
Mark Sable and Giorgio Pontrelli. I don't want to assume anyone's gender, but it does not sound like it. Actually, let me go to the back. I think I did see it. Mark Sable. No. Giorgio Pontrelli is Italian. Pippa Boland is the colorist. Her pronouns, it looks like. So I think that they maybe tried to reach for some diverse creators, but maybe didn't reach far enough to, I think, really tell that story. But we'll see. Maybe we'll get to see some more diversity and really challenging those topics, right?
Absolutely.
So
We were talking about DC.
Yeah,
let's we derailed.
Yeah, I think that I am really excited to see DC Future State. And when I was going down the list of not just the titles that were coming out and the creative teams, the first thought I had was they watched your video about their lack of representation. Like literally I was going through it and I'm like, they heard her talk about how like we don't get really great female led titles. And even right now, I think, I'm not sure if Punchline is a limited series, but I know that Far Sector is a limited series. Aquaman, written by Kelly Sue DeConnick, is about to end. So we're kind of seeing these drop-offs, but I'm excited about Future State.
I'm on the fence with Future Sight because I have a lot of feelings about Future Sight. So I'm tired of events. I'm tired of these big, long, like this one isn't necessarily a crossover, but it is a crossover because you're halting everything else and focusing on Future Sight. But to me, it feels like Convergence again. And when Convergence was announced, I was so happy. And I was like, oh my God, I'm finally going to get back my characters. I get to see Roy Harper and Leanne Harper, and I get to see Oliver Queen for the first time in 5 years. What is going on? And then it ended up just being, there were fun, really great isolated stories, but overall it was a fucking mess. And I'm like, what is happening? And you go to conventions now and it's just long boxes and long boxes and long boxes of Convergence.
Yep.
So like,
dollar bin.
I'm like, is Future State going to be the same thing? But also, too, Future State is going to, the speculators, I can see them. They're going to be like, I need to get everything. But positivity in Future State, yes. I love how diverse it looks like they're going, not only with the characters, because we are getting a non-binary Flash. We are getting a Brazilian Wonder Woman. We're getting, is it a black Batman?
I believe so, yeah.
They didn't reveal who the Batman was. Yeah. I am like, what is happening? Like, what is actually going on? And then when we looked at the creative teams, you know, we got Vita Ayla, we've got Becky Coonan. I'm like, what is happening? Like, maybe they did listen to me. And if so, thank you, DC. Now hire back Andy Corey because he's the best editor y'all ever had. But that's my opinion. But in terms of Future State, I'm only going to be picking up a few titles. So I'm going to definitely be picking up Catwoman because I have to.
You have to.
I have to. I have a whole
You're like contractually obligated.
I'm contractually obligated. I have a whole drawer that's just Catwoman.
Oh my goodness.
Catwoman. I'm like, oof. So I'm going to pick up Catwoman. I'm going to pick up Immortal Wonder Woman because those covers are gorgeous. Yeah. If I happen to read it, great. I'm definitely going to pick up Yana Flor Wonder Woman because I want to read her. She's going to be kick-ass and wonderful. And I wasn't going to read it, but now I am going to get it. I'm going to get the 2 Teen Titans issues because they're introducing Red X. And I'm like, what the fuck? Are you bringing back childhood? That book's going to be insane. And I'm like on the fence. I kind of want to pick up that Aquaman book because I like the idea of their teenage daughter taking on the role while having Aqualad as like her mentor teacher. So I'm like, okay, strong representation we got going on there. So like those books I'm really excited about. And like, listen, I'm gonna rant for like 20 seconds here. All right,
it's all yours. Do you take 30 seconds?
Why is the Batman Future State $7.99, y'all? Why is it $8 All right. Yeah. And that one's the only book that is coming out twice a month. It's coming out bi-weekly. And each individual issue is $8. And if you look at the one that they just announced this month, I think it was this month, it has Batgirls by Vita Ayla. And then there's the Gotham City Sirens story. And I'm like, do I want to spend $8 to get what is probably going to be a really great Batgirl story and a really great Gotham. First of all, we haven't seen Gotham City Sirens since Conversion. But why is it $8? DC. I know why it's $8 because it's Batman.
Because they know that, like, not just I call it that dumb bitch money, because I feel like a dumb bitch when I'm like, okay, when it's like, okay, like Jennifer, time to ring up, it's $200.
Yep.
But at the same time, I'm just like, I know that I need to support these books. I know that I've been asking for these stories, so I need to put my money where my mouth is.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh.
So what I would probably recommend to anyone who looks at the future state kind of like rundown, and I know that I need to go and double check it because it was a lot of titles. It was like between 15, maybe 10 to 15 titles, 20 titles, somewhere around there.
Insane. And it feels like with solicitations that literally just dropped on Friday, there was more in there. And I'm like,
yeah.
Dumb bitch money. Here we go.
Dumb bitch money. Yeah, just go ahead and start saving now. But here's what I would also say is that one, contact your local comic book shop. And a lot of times when you have a pull list, what a lot of shops, well, not every shop has a pull list service, or do they have discounts, but a lot of times they'll say, okay, if you have 5 titles on your pull list, we'll give you a 5% discount. 10 titles or more gets you 10%.
Because I have no discount. Okay. And I used to work there.
It varies from shop to shop. And there are some that you could even, like one previous shop that I used to get stuff from when I lived in South Carolina, I continued my pull list with them even though I moved. And even though they sent me a box once a month, I got a discount on my books, which pretty much paid for shipping. So like it ended up evening out, which was nice. So I would say for anyone who is intimidated by the size of what it looks like and can't spend that type of money, I would say see if you can get a discount because of a pull list.
That and one really good thing to look at in terms of Future State. Now, I'm not saying to go out and buy every issue of Future State because there are so many, but they are, aside from Batman, because he is a dumb bitch and gets to break the rules, the Future State issues are only 2 issues. So it's the first issue in January and the second issue in February. So it's not necessarily a huge commitment. And I feel like in the long run, it's going to be actually cheaper for you to buy them in the single issues, aside from maybe Batman, to buy in the single issues versus buying in trade, because chances are once Future State gets compiled, it's going to be kind of a mishposh, modge of stories together. And you're probably going to be like, oh, well, I want to read these 2 stories in volume 1, but I want to read this story in volume 2. And I feel like it's just going to be cheaper for you if you have specific stories that you want to get, because I'm plugging that Red X book. So that Red X book is going to be good. Don't know who it's going to be, because, I mean, it could be Jason. No, it can't be Jason. I'm going crazy at this point. Who's going to be the Red X? I think that needs to be our question of the day, is who is the Red X?
Like, take bets on it.
Take bets on it. I still think it's going to be Jason Todd, but who knows at this point?
Who knows? I'll definitely have to check that out. And I think, honestly, I think that if, not necessarily that I want a ton of speculators out there, but a lot of times what ends up happening with these books is that they get announced, no one puts them on their pull list, and then people go and sweep them up. And it's usually, like, having like worked at a comic book shop, I've seen this happens, is where people who genuinely want to read the story, who are your like Wednesday warriors that come in every single Wednesday to pick up their books, maybe couldn't come in until the end of the day, but a speculator came in because they found out Wednesday morning that it was hot and they just want to go ahead and flip it for $30 the same day. So what I would say is that if you really love your local comic book shop, let them know that you want to order this, because usually, unless there's some dumb thing that happens with Diamond, like if Diamond ships it and it gets damaged or something happens, maybe it's late, you should be able to get a copy of it. And that's usually going to be the way to do it, is if you put it on your pull list, you pre-order early. That way it usually guarantees you a copy. And I really think that because these titles are going to be hot, if you do go ahead and you get the single issues, if you don't love it, I'm pretty sure someone will. You could just go ahead and sell it. Exactly. So say
that, and being 2 former comic shop employees, pre-ordering comics in general, especially in a time like this, is so important and so impactful. Not only to your local comic shop, obviously, because they need all the help that they can get right now from us and from supporters and readers, but it's also a big help to your publishers. And like, for something like Future State in particular that is boasting such diversity, we need to put our money where our money where our mouth is, and show these publishers that this is what we want. This is what we need from our comics, is to see these inclusive characters and these inclusive stories, so that it will continue on down the line. Because worst comes to worst is it's going to be like, oh, well, people are wanting this, but the sales sucked. So we're not going to do it again. We're just going to stick to dumb Batman books. And I'm like, oh, we'll stick to dumb Batman books.
Yep. And I think that for me, like, it's really important for me to see myself in the comic books that I read, and not just myself, but I like to see what my friends and my family look like. So being friends with people of color, being friends with, queer people, being in the queer community, it's like, I want to see that in the comic books that I read, and not just, like you mentioned earlier, Star Wars, just two people kissing in the background. It's like, oh, there's gay people there. We do exist. So I think that, I don't know, it's not just us who needs to buy that. It's, people who've been buying Batman for years need to buy this too.
And speaking of, we're going to segue. Look at our segues. Speaking of DC Comics and diversity and inclusivity, Suicide Squad. How is this? Listen. How is this Suicide Squad, which is known for being like, I don't want to say a boy book, because I love Suicide Squad and I love books like Suicide Squad and Secret Six and stuff like that, where it focuses on your villains. How is it that a book like Suicide Squad has more diversity and representation from both DC and Marvel right now? I don't know how that is possible. So we see gay representation, we see lesbian representation with Ozita, and then one of the things that really shocked me was we see non-binary representation, which is unheard of right now in mainstream comics. So not only that, but this book is fucking hilarious. Okay, there's a whole segment where Deadshot and Batman argue over a puppy, and
it's so wholesome.
He literally is like, "You can't punch me. I have a puppy," and Batman's like, "You're right." And I'm like, "I love
damn, got me there."
So read this book. Issue 11 is coming out either next week or the week after, and that's going to be the end of the series, because it is a planned series. But it's such a small run. It's going to probably be compiled in 2 trades. So it's like the perfect new introductory to Suicide Squad if you just want a really good DC book that's fun and lighthearted and feel good, because a book like Suicide Squad should not feel good. And I was really worried when Tom Taylor was announced that he was writing this, because in previous Suicide Squad books, it's like, all right, a character is dropping every other issue and you don't get attached unless it's Harley Quinn, because they need her to make the money. But with this Suicide Squad, the kill count hasn't been that high, which is, again, surprising, because Tom Taylor is known for doing Injustice and known for killing off characters. So it's nice to see a wholesome, happy book from him,
Especially when I think one thing... But the thing that kind of drew me into comic books was that it wasn't always wholesome, and it wasn't always your average superhero. I loved those dark and grittier stories. And I feel like especially this last year, with a lot of the Dark Knight's Metal and XX Stream and all of that, I'm just I feel like we're trying to push the envelope that doesn't need to be pushed, or we're pushing an envelope without there being substance in it, right? So we're just pushing an empty envelope around.
Exactly.
So, and I'll be honest, I'm not reading Suicide Squad, but from what you've just said, that makes me actually want to pick it up, and that would almost give me a little bit more faith in DC and the stories that they're publishing, because I'm here for those dark stories, but I'm also going to be here. I'll be the first one to admit, I had Transformers, My Little Pony on my pull list, but I also, and even though I'm just going to use this as an example, because I feel like it's the complete opposite. Even though I didn't love it, I have Faithless 2 on my pull list. And even though I won't get into that right now, so there's these two things. So I feel like I like those dark and gritty stories, but when there's substance behind it, and I don't feel like I got a lot of substance from the Dark Knights and the Joker War and things like that. I did actually enjoy Punchline, and I spent that dumb bitch money, and I enjoyed Punchline. I really did.
I feel
And
like
it
I
was
need to pick it up now. I'm hoping my shop still has it. I was really hesitant on picking up because it does. Listen, I was a Punchline advocate. I have not read anything with Punchline. I only picked up that Art Germ variant. I think she is a cutie patootie. I like her design, but other than that, everything with Punchline and me is superficial.
yeah,
And I'm like, okay,
that's
it's
okay.
a comic. That's fine. People will like it. Mirka and Alpha fans will go crazy over it. I'm not, but the way that you were talking about it and how much you enjoyed it makes me kind of want to try it and pick it out
Yeah.
and see how it goes.
I think it was also because I read the Three Jokers story.
Bet.
Didn't like it. My biggest, and I talk about this all the time, so anyone who's like listened to me rant on Comic Shop News, like, you know that I hate a Batman origin story. We get it. His parents died. The pearls were ripped. And of course we read Batman Three Jokers, and page 9, the pearls get ripped off. And I'm
And they're
just like,
fake
really?
pearls. Did anybody ever tell you that? They're fake pearls. Real pearls are tied off
Tied.
in individual strings. So I'm sorry, but Thomas Wayne bought Martha Wayne fake pearls. So
So is this is the real story. This is the real story
I
about,
want to know about the pearls. Where did
that's the
pearls
real tragedy of the story. Um so anyways, I think maybe I just came off of reading like finishing Batman Three Jokers last week, and then I'm like, okay, I'll pick up Punchline and just see if I like it. And maybe it's because I had such low expectations of it. I actually enjoyed it. Do I expect a lot from it? Of course not. But I think that it's just going to be an easy read.
It could be, and like, because James Tinian is doing that one as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
And his style, it's so, I think that he's a really good diverse writer. I don't want to say that he's an underrated author, but I do think that
Batman. Once you write Batman, you're no longer underrated. You're now,
no. I
top
think that
number.
his other stories are underrated though, because he's doing correct me if I'm wrong, he's doing Department of Truth,
Yep.
and then he was also doing oh
Something
my,
for the children.
yep. And so I think that not necessarily those two stories are really weird, but he was also doing another one.
I have like this theory. I feel like James Tinian and his writing is two different people because
Yeah.
he has two very different styles of writing. When we look at his current Batman run and his Department of Truth, which I hated Department of Truth. I was so excited for this book, and I'm like, it is so wordy and so convoluted, and I'm like, what is happening? When he writes like that, because we see that in his Batman as well. When he writes like that, I'm looking at the Scott Snyder prodigy that took Scott Snyder's training course. But when I look at his other books, when I look at his Detective Comics Rebirth run, which I know that we talk about, look at his Something is Killing the Children, when we look at his other books like Backstagers and Wind, that to me feels like what James Tinian wants to do. You see this kind of, not necessarily lighthearted, but you can see this kind of like whimsical play and a unique style of writing, whereas it feels like, especially his Batman, because that's the easiest thing to compare it to. Yeah. But when we look at his Batman, it feels like a cut copy paste of Scott Snyder. And as somebody who's not a fan of Scott Snyder, I don't like that. So I'm convinced that James Tinian IV is just two different people, two different styles of writing. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah. Hopefully, I mean, I 100%, like, it feels like two different styles. I prefer those other stories, like especially Wind. I think that one was so wholesome. I really enjoyed it. So I want to go ahead and I want to see more.
Yeah, for sure.
We're about an hour and a half here. Just one last thing that I want to go ahead and, like, I think we talked about so many things. I think I'll go ahead and close us out. But one thing that I wanted to talk about is, because you have a Patreon as well, like, can you tell anyone watching, like, what you do on your Patreon, plans you have for your Patreon, things coming up?
I have no idea. I feel like so Patreon is such a weird place, because it's like, yeah, I love, and people were always telling me to make a Patreon, But it's like, what is somebody like me who just talks about comics? What do I do with that? Because I'm the type of person where it's like, if you're giving me something, I want to give you something in return. So my Patreon, which you can find ironically at patreon.com/thatcomicgirl.
And it's in the comments. It's down below.
The comments for me. So I have 3 different tiers right now. You know, my first tier is really just like, hey, it's like a tip jar. Like, you watch my show, you like the content I produce. Thank you. I mean, thank you regardless what you support.
Thank you. Yeah.
My second tier is like, and anybody of any tier actually gets access to my monthly newsletter. So in my monthly newsletters, I kind of give people and patrons a sneak peek as to what I'm working on, the new series that I'm picking up that month that I maybe or maybe not talking about, depending on, you know, what happens in life. Like just plans that I have for the future and what I want to see with my channel. And most of the time it's just me thanking people over and over again, because that's the type of person I am. But it really is connecting with the audience. And then, of course, I'm still trying to do on my Patreon a Patreon exclusive podcast, creatively titled That Comic Podcast, because I'm good at naming things, where I just kind of talk about comics and I talk about whatever I want, breaking news. I know I'm definitely going to do a focus on solicitations as they start to come out, and talk about books that I'm excited for, things that I think are overrated, maybe covers I think that are cute.
Ooh.
I don't know. And then, of course, the last tier is just, it gives you a more in-depth look into my creative process. So when I do my big video essays on comics, I like to publish those so that way people can see my creative process and see all of the dumbass jokes that I script into my videos. Because trust me, they do not come off the top of the head. I have to think about them. And then, of course, it's just like crediting people in videos, because for some reason, YouTube people really like seeing their name at the end of a YouTube video, which I guess is the same as seeing your name at the end of a movie. So, I mean, hey.
You're like, I did that. Like, I gave money to it, but
if people like that, I'm going to let them do that. So, but eventually I want to, like I said, I want to be that type of person that you're giving me support and I want to give you something in return. I know that you let people pick what is on your pull list, which I think is really fun. I don't think I could do that because I'm so picky. But like, I want to do like something more creative, because that's what I went to school for. And I was thinking about doing like fun postcards from places in comics and designing them and sending them out with cute little handwritten notes, because I love receiving fan mail. I love fan mail. So I want to be able to do that. But Patreon, whatever, it's just such a weird concept to think about, because it's not like being an artist and, I can make a sticker club and a print club. We have to think outside of the box as YouTubers, what we can offer people. So I guess this is my plug, that if anybody has good ideas on what me and Jen should do for our patrons, let us know. What do you want to see from us?
Yeah. I think that a lot of times I struggle thinking like I need to do more. Like, people are paying me to do things. And I've been talking to a couple friends who are also in the process of possibly doing a Patreon or doing like Kickstarters and things like that. And like, I think my biggest takeaway, and maybe this is just my perspective from supporting several Patreons, being a patron of people, is that I'm not in it for the content. Like, I'm not necessarily like, I'm going to pay someone $10 and I want $10 worth of content every month. I'm more of just like, I love what you do. Here's, like you said, like a tip jar. So I think that that's really, really cool. So, Patreon is really fun. I think you're right. Like, if anyone has ideas for Patreon content that they want to see.
Guidebook, okay. At this point.
And it's tough because Patreon does a lot for different creatives. So like, you could go and Patreon gives you little hints, and they're like things you can do for your patrons. And it's like, I don't feel like a lot of those really line up with what I do, or
that
things
I feel
like that.
This whole comic tuber thing that we've been doing, that I see that other channels have been doing, it's such a new experience, and it's something new that we're seeing, that we're all still trying to figure out what it is that we want to do, what we want to offer, what we want to see the outcome of it in the end, if there is an outcome. So it's just going to be a giant learning experience, because it is something so fresh and so new.
It is. One of my favorite quotes is, "We make the road by walking," and so we're just walking. I want to go ahead and thank you so much for kind of like last minute, because I know I texted you this morning and I was like, "Hey, we're not doing this thing. Do you want to do this other thing with me? So let's do it." So thank you.
And then I was like, duh, of course.
Duh. So thank you. And I want to thank everyone in the chat. I know there's not a lot of people like still here, but thank you for everyone who chatted below.
Yeah, you spent your Sunday with us. Like, that's rad. Thank you.
Thank you so much for even spending like a little bit of time. So I appreciate that. Thank you to everyone who's watching. If you haven't already, do the like and subscribe thing. Like I said earlier, Mars, your Patreon as well as your YouTube are in the comments. And then there's also a link to my Patreon. And then there's also a link to Comic Chop News YouTube, where I am like consistently on there every week. So if you liked this, please go and like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. And I don't know, I feel like I'm weird at like these like ending, like be good to each other and be a good neighbor and
wear a mask,
and wash your hands and do all those things. Appreciate it. Robo, I see your comment there. Thank you so much. Stay home, read comics. There you go. I'm going to steal that from a whatchamacallit. Stay home, read comics. Bye everyone.
Bye.